Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. McCord, in your testimony, you state that GAO needs to make appropriate changes in its organization and operating policies to accommodate the distinctive features of technology assessments and other foresight projects. Can you highlight the key things that Knapp thinks GAO needs to do to be successful?
Yes, thank you for that question. A couple parts to that. First, our perception from the people that we interviewed, that the panel and the staff interviewed, was that there's maybe not full awareness of GAO's capability, given that the STAA office is fairly new. The technology assessment effort is older, but the new office, so there may be just some lack of awareness on the customer side of what GAO is able to do as the capability develops. But we clearly got, as we talked to people, the concern that the overall mission of GAO is as a performance evaluator, as an auditor, it looks backward, and that this function looks forward, the function we're talking about today, so that there was a concern about whether those two cultures can fit perfectly well, and so our recommendation is to try and separate this office a bit from the overall backward-looking, evaluating, auditing function, partly because of perception of people that you were working with that do I want to fully share everything that I'm doing with someone who might come back in an audit later and criticize that based on that conversation. That may be fair or unfair to GAO, and you know, I'm sure Dr. Persons might want to comment on that, but there's certainly the perception that the kind of openness that you want in scientific endeavors might be somewhat of a bad mix with you know, the people that are going to come and audit that issue, that same issue, so that a separation would be beneficial in our view.
What about that, Dr. Persons? Can you address how GAO can focus on those kind of recommendations?
Yes, sir. Happy to do so, and thanks for the question. I think the NAPA panel and Mr. McCord was pointing to the issue. Essentially, it goes to organizational change and growth. I'll just point to the fact that GAO really started performance auditing in this program evaluation context really in the 1970s. So it's been decades since that time. That is now our dominant product line, if you will, of work. We were started, of course, as a financial accounting and financial auditing and things, but we have greatly expanded our professional services for the Congress. As our former Comptroller General said, we are world-class professional services organization that just happens to work for the Congress. And so this adds, the technology assessment is a function that adds in and can fit well to our long-standing, again, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, almost half a century of work, starting in social science work and so on, but moving forward into, with the evolution, especially led by this committee on things in the space program or nuclear issues or what have you. We've built up expertise. And not just only recently as well, and we believe we can.
So you're comfortable the question of whether an institution with a history of being a review group can also be a forward-focused entity?
Yes, sir. So, like Mr. McCord was saying, essentially we are ex post in one sense the training in terms of looking at something. We have to be fact-based and so on. We're not about predicting the future as a rule. However, the ex-ante work, we've been doing technology assessment, as was noted, for almost 2 decades now. And we also have a sister institution or entity within GAO now called the Center for Strategic Foresight. And that's just because they're not all just in the tech assessment, because although all tech assessment is foresight, not all foresight is technology and science necessarily, although it's increasingly moving in that way. So there is a recognition of ex-ante work and working toward and doing policy analysis in that particular dimension, offering up options to Congress that are balanced that we believe we can do.
Dr. McCord, your study committee looked at the option of reinstating OTA or something similar and ultimately didn't recommend that option. What were the downsides of trying to bring back the OTA?
Thank you for that question. We did not recommend it. It would be, I think, incorrect to say that we oppose it. And the Academy would think it was a terrible idea if Congress did that. But you can't help but notice that for 25 years, Congress has chosen not to do that. So the question of whether the support is there to go that route and sustain it, you know, that's a serious question for us, the viability of doing something that you've consistently chosen not to do. So that's why we believe that if you follow our approach, first of all, you could go that route eventually. Remember, we talk about creating an advisory office, which is much smaller in sort of scope and capability than OTA was, giving GAO and CRS a chance to do more, come back and evaluate that. You could always move in that direction if you needed to, but again, you look at the fact that Congress has consistently not found a consensus around reinstating OTA, that kind of viability question is part of the equation that we talked about, as well as what is desirable. What is desirable would probably be to have, 500 or 1,000 people dedicated solely to this, but are you willing to pay that, to support that financially and otherwise in Congress? It seems that so far the answer has been no, so that bore on our thinking as well.
Understood. Yield back, Madam Chair.